Well, the Harper government is basically freaking out about the possibility that Obama would say no to the pipeline.
Alberta Premier Alison Redford took aim at the leader of the federal opposition, accusing Thomas Mulcair of betraying Canada's national interests during a recent trip to the U.S. Capitol.
Before the march even began, they just ran into the crowd for no apparent reason.
The government of Prime Minister Stephen Harper is being criticised for violating the rights of Indigenous people.
We are back again. Hi there, I'm Darren Howard.
I'm Robert Nisbet.
And I'm Monica Solmark.
We are here for the activist within everybody because life is changing. Our society is growing up. It's only banks and governments that can't figure it out. So we're going to keep broadcasting. And apparently, our Prime Minister is going to do the same thing.
Well, he's having to pay some attention to activists south of the border.
No, say it's not
the ones
so.
that are in opposition to our biggest cash cow we got going.
Which one is that?
Probably the one with the greatest greenhouse emissions.
Yes, the greatest. That would be ethical oil.
Something that even Germany doesn't want to get involved in, apparently.
I know. Did you see that?
I know.
What is that about?
Germany said we're not going to touch tar sands with a 10-foot pole. Of course, our, Prime Minister is bent right over and saying, yes, please, we would like to have some more, and we would not. This is Radio Free Canada. Let's run this clip and get into it.
Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore, and welcome to this edition of the Engler Report with Eve Engler. He now joins us from Ottawa. Eve is a commentator and an author. His most recent book is The Ugly Canadian, Stephen Harper's Foreign Policy. Thank you for joining us again, Eve.
Thanks for having me.
So the New York Times came out and said now's the time to say no to the Keystone XL tar sands pipeline. There's been a massive movement in the United States against it, the big protests and personalities coming out trying to stop this pipeline, taking Alberta tar sands oil in a pipeline down to Texas. How's all this being received in Canada and by you could say the public and by the Harper government?
Well, the Harper government is basically freaking out about the possibility that Obama would say no to the pipeline. They've launched a full court press in terms of lobbying in the U.S. For the pipeline. To have a government in this country so aggressively, basically in a political battle with a social movement in the U.S. is not something that I think maybe has ever been seen in the history of Canadian-U.S. relations. But the dominant media is almost overwhelming in their endorsement of the pipeline.
Apparently, a lot of one of the bigger refineries that can deal with this heavy crude is owned by the Koch brothers.
They have significant interest. I believe they have some interest in the pipeline itself. Even they have some investment in the pipeline itself. And one of the things that's interesting about the Canadian lobbying is just how involved Canadian diplomats are with American oil companies and working with the American oil companies and really stoking their lobbying for the pipeline.
All right, thanks for joining us, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.
And the most offensive part about that is apparently Macleans Magazine has jumped in on the Harper bandwagon of propaganda and are promoting this oil sands like it's a job creator.
Well, Eve just said there, the major media is involved in heavily promoting the Keystone Pipeline.
So, I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, as a Canadian person, I'm totally not down with it, and I'm really disappointed in Macleans. I used to think it was a great magazine, and now I'm wondering whose platform they're pushing.
Well, that would be the right-wing conservative viewpoint.
I mean, just to point an incriminating elbow, if you take a look, a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, they had a report about oil on it, and it was just a love me for the oil Macleans Magazine. I'm going to try and get that picture up on the internet right now. However, if you take a look on the inside of the issue, not one ad from any advertiser in the whole magazine.
Really? I wonder who's paying for that issue.
Okay, now how do you put out a magazine with no ads in it? And Macleans Magazine put one out pro-oil.
I think that was by the bankers.
Yeah. Oh, actually, here, let me check that. I think a Buick ad was at the very beginning of it.
Well, gee, I wonder what those run on.
Let's run this real quick, and we'll mock some more.
It's not every day federal and provincial leaders go toe-to-toe, but it happened today. Alberta Premier Alison Redford took aim at the leader of the federal opposition, accusing Thomas Mulcair of betraying Canada's national interests during a recent trip to the U.S. Capitol. As Francis Silvaggio reports, the two politicians are at odds over the proposed Keystone XL Pipeline.
That's something that sets Alberta
Alberta's
apart.
premier has never been shy about her feelings on the Keystone Pipeline project.
There is no doubt that this project represents tremendous opportunities for us as Canadians.
And speaking to the Economic Club of Canada in Ottawa today, Alison Redford wasn't shy about her feelings on the federal NDP leader's recent trip to Washington.
I actually believe it is a fundamental betrayal of Canada's long-term economic interest.
It's an honor to be here with you.
Last week, Thomas Mulcair traveled to the U.S. Capitol, where he openly criticized the Canadian government's environmental record and handling of our lucrative resource.
The project that's there is the result of the activities of a government that doesn't respect the basic rules of sustainable development, and we'll let the Americans sort themselves out on that.
Given the billions of dollars at stake, the timing of the NDP leader's trip has been widely criticized as self-serving.
He should be ashamed of himself for selling out Canada.
But Mulcair says he's done nothing of the sort.
We'll let them continue to plead for the export of 40,000 Canadian jobs to the U.S. We'll stand up for Canadian jobs.
The government of Alberta, though, says undermining Keystone will cost far more than 40,000 jobs, which is why it took out a $30,000 ad in the New York Times this weekend extolling the benefits of the pipeline, and today urged Canada's economic leaders to lend their support.
We have a duty as political leaders at every level to fight to get the highest price possible for that oil, to fund the priorities of all Albertans and all Canadians.
The U.S. president is expected to announce his decision on Keystone later this year. Francis Silvaggio, Global News.
Okay, so group groan. I mean, terrible. Come on. It's like money and profits over anything to do with logic.
The denial is strong with this one.
Well, and what about this whole economy thing versus our environment? Like, do they not catch on to this yet?
We are stewards of this planet. We are here to provide a good planet for the next generation, not a parking lot. Okay, and that's what we're getting.
So the Economic Club of Canada is that kind of like the CFR?
I don't know.
I mean, it seems kind of like a right-wing little group thing.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not really getting behind the logic of this one. We do have a major update. Okay, so we do want you to question our facts, okay, because we're not major media. We don't have commercials saying trust us or we're the authority on anything, because we're not. So we want you to go and check our facts and get informed and understand it's not ethical oil. It's really bad for the planet.
And not only get informed, actually do something. Write a letter, get on Facebook, make a page that says Canada loves the environment. You guys, we can do so much more than just watch radio and video clips.
Yeah, I know. And get out there and make sure you make it happen. That's what we did with police brutality, and it worked. And we're going to talk about that in a second. I want to talk about Quebec, yes?
More people that are making things happen.
There are some serious people making things happen.
Yeah, Francois.
This is cool.
And the French.
I'm liking it.
The protest did not even begin before police started making arrests. Around 500 people came out to the 17th annual anti-police brutality march in downtown Montreal. People who say police brutality happens all too often in the city, and the police are not held accountable for their actions.
Before the march even began, they just ran to the crowd for no apparent reason. And then, since there was chaos, they took that reason to just charge into us with their batons and shield.
Ironically, this protest is supposed to be against police brutality. However, each year, hundreds of people are arrested and claim they were assaulted by the police.
Police use horses, pepper spray, and kettling to disperse the crowd. Because of municipal laws requiring itineraries for such events, the march was deemed illegal from the start. Protesters say they did nothing wrong.
They just brutal every time for nothing. We're just walking the street and they start and pushing us and everything else.
Early reports said scores of people were arrested, but many argue the worst violence at marches in Montreal are committed by police and not the demonstrators. Even a university television camera director was arrested for asking a question.
They arrested our director just because he was asking something.
Police say 2 officers were taken to the hospital, one with 2 broken teeth. The protests against police brutality are making life harder for the Canadian police, which is under fire for abuses and excessive use of force against people. Ashante Hathaway, Press TV, Montreal.
And just like in British Columbia, there's no accountability for these guys at all. You don't hear about cops getting thrown in jail. They don't lose their jobs. Extraordinary powers never results in extraordinary punishment.
And it's funny how there was no coverage on this on major Canadian network
did you
news.
Hear that? There was a big no-show. This is 14 years of annual protests against police brutality.
14 years?
That's right. Okay.
14 years.
Yeah. I was sitting there, I was shocked. I'm researching police brutality. We've got a major documentary coming up. I was a full 8 months into my studies before I even found out how long the police brutality problem had been going on in Quebec and how activated those people were. Hats off to the university professor for getting arrested for asking a question.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay? I want to find out what happens to him. Of course, the cops think we don't have the internet.
It's funny about that, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, it's weird. And the PMO's office, they don't think we have the internet either. It's like they think we're going to forget.
I think they really are mentally insane.
Yeah, they are. They
have to be.
Cognitive dissonance, okay? The story right here, we're going to catch up more. We've got a major documentary out. We're halfway there on our legal fund to fight Castanet for censoring our police brutality video. But I want you to run this because...
Once again, wrong side of history.
The Canadian government continues to prevent the UN Special Rapporteur on Indigenous peoples from making an official visit to Canada. James Anaya, the Special Rapporteur, has said the federal government has ignored his request to visit Canada in order to investigate the human rights situation of the Indigenous people. Anaya has written to the federal government at least 3 times since February last year, requesting permission to visit the country. The government of Prime Minister Stephen Harper is being criticised for violating the rights of Indigenous people. Joshua Blakeney is our correspondent with me now live from Calgary. So, Joshua, what is the justification that the Harper government is putting forward for basically not allowing the Special Rapporteur to come into Canada?
Yes, Homer, we have to situate this obviously in the context of the Canadian government incessantly going around the world lecturing other governments on allowing UN inspectors into their countries, often with unfounded allegations. And yet now the Harper government is not allowing the UN Special Rapporteur on the rights of Indigenous peoples into their country. We don't have a justification. All that has happened is that in February of 2012, the Special Rapporteur wrote to the Government of Canada and says that protocol states that you must offer me an official invite in order for me to then accept it and come to Canada. And he asked for that official invitation and it hasn't been granted. It ought to be kept in mind that the Harper government wants to go around the world right now lecturing other countries on what a democracy looks like, based on this presupposition that Canada is some kind of utopian democracy. But in recent weeks and months and years, internationally respected mainstream human rights organizations time and time again have been rapping the Harper government and slamming the Harper government for their mistreatment of Canada's First Nations. And we also should keep in mind that Canada's government's heavily influenced by the interests of the State of Israel. And in order to appear like a good Zionist, you have to hate the United Nations, because the United Nations is one of the only international venues where Israel comes in for its fair share of criticism that's commensurate with public opinion.
Thank you very much. Joshua Blakeney, our correspondent there in Calgary.
Joshua Blakeney says it the way it is. Yes, okay. And it's messed up that the UN is being disallowed.
That's completely wrong. But I mean, not that I pull much stock in the UN as a body that's able to enforce anything.
Well,
but
look
still,
at Israel. Okay, Israel ignores every one of the UN sanctions or every one of the UN declarations. And it treats the Palestinian people like Harper treats Aboriginal people.
Well, Israel only has 2 friends.
Oh, yes.
U.S. and Canada.
I know. And it's not the Canadian people.
It's getting fewer all the time.
Yeah, sad but true. We're trying to get us on the right side of history by keeping the conversation going. If you've got input or anything you want to add, just get a hold of us on YouTube or Facebook at Radio Free Canada. I'm Darren Howard.
I'm Robert Nisbet.
And I'm Monica Solmark.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to come right back with some more action-packed news because we have Obama to cover.
Ooh.
One of my favorite subjects.
You mean
Obama, the drone striking Nobel Peace Prize winning man himself.
That
bringing
guy,
us
yeah.
the NDAA in our crossfire next. Radio Free Canada.